Mom said she only had enough love for one child and chose my brother, so I found myself a new family. She said it so casually that at first I thought I'd misheard her, like the words bounced off a wall in my brain and came back wrong. We were at the kitchen table, the cheap plastic tablecloth sticking to my forearms, my brother across from me scrolling his phone, and my mom rinsing dishes with her back to us when she said, "I only had enough love for one child, and I chose your brother. You're stronger. You'll be fine." For a second, nobody moved. The tap was still running, hitting the same chip plate with this steady hiss. My brother looked up from his phone, eyes flicking between her and me, like maybe this was a joke he hadn't been prepped for. My throat went dry, so fast it hurt. "What?" I said, but it came out thin, almost polite. Mom glanced over her shoulder, eyebrows raised like I was the one being dramatic. "Don't start," she sighed. "I'm just being honest. You asked why I baby him. That's why. I only have so much in me. He needed it more. You've always looked after yourself." She turned the tap off like we were done. My heart was beating hard enough that my fingers tingled. The chair suddenly felt too small under me. I stared at the pattern of the tablecloth, faded strawberries, little cracks in the plastic, and had this weird urge to laugh because who actually admits that out loud? Who says out loud, in their own kitchen, that they picked one kid and let the other one sink? It didn't start with that sentence, obviously. If anything, that sentence was just the moment she finally said the quiet part out loud. I'm 29 now, my brother Jake is 31, and I can look back over pretty much our entire childhood and see the pattern clear as day. But when you're in it, you don't see emotional neglect or scapegoat or any of those therapy words. You just see your mom, your brother, and this constant, low-level feeling that something is off and it's probably your fault. For context, I'm the younger one. When we were kids, everyone used to say how lucky I was to have an older brother. Built-in best friend, our neighbor would say, ruffling Jake's hair and then mine as an afterthought. I believed it for a long time. Jake taught me how to ride a bike, sort of. He also pushed me downhill as a joke the first time, and I still have a faint scar on my knee from eating asphalt while he laughed, and then cried when Mom came out and yelled at me for making a scene. Mom's version of fairness was weird. Jake got the bigger bedroom because he's older. He got out of chores because boys don't notice mess the way girls do. If we both brought home report cards, mine would get a quick good job, while she was already on the phone bragging about Jake's C+ in math because he really struggles, and look how well he's doing. If he forgot his lunch, she drove it to school. If I forgot mine, I needed to be more responsible. One of my earliest clear memories of the difference was when I was 7 and Jake was 9. We were in the living room, and he'd built this elaborate Lego spaceship. I reached out to touch it, literally just to spin one of the little engines, and he slapped my hand away so hard my wrist stung. I yelped, more from surprise than pain, and he shoved me. I fell backwards, knocked over Mom's cheap floor lamp, and the bulb shattered. Mom came running in from the kitchen, saw the broken lamp, saw my tear-streaked face and Jake's guilty one, and without even asking what happened, she grabbed my arm and hissed, "Why do you always break things?" Then she turned to Jake, softening immediately. "Are you okay, baby? Did she scare you?" It was like that, over and over in different costumes. When Jake forgot his homework, the teacher was picking on him. When I got in trouble for talking in class, I was disappointing her. When Jake decided he didn't want to do soccer anymore, she told everyone he was focusing on his academics. When I quit ballet because the teacher kept pinching my hips, I was giving up like always. Some of that is just crappy parenting, I know, but layered over years, it starts to write a story about who you are. Jake wasn't a monster. That's the messed up part. He could be really fun. He'd sneak me into his room to watch scary movies I was way too young for, and we'd both get in trouble when I inevitably had nightmares. He'd walk me to school when there were reports of a weird man in the neighborhood, pretending he was just going that way anyway. When Dad left for good when I was 10, Jake was the one who found me in the closet, sitting in the dark with my knees to my chest, and tossed a pillow at me. It's quieter without his snoring, right?" he said, trying to make me laugh. But even those moments got twisted because of how Mom reacted to us as a unit. If Jake did something nice for me, she'd praise him like he'd cured cancer. "See how sweet your brother is?" she'd say, as if I should be grateful to even exist near his glow. If I did something nice for him, made him breakfast when he overslept, covered for him when he snuck out, she barely noticed, or worse, accused me of smothering him. Her attention with a flashlight that she kept pointed firmly on Jake, with the edge of the beam occasionally catching me in the fringe. High school made the gap more obvious. Jake started slipping, skipping classes, hanging out with older kids, smoking behind the gym. He crashed Mom's car once, coming home drunk from a party. He was 16, she was working 2 jobs, and that car was basically her lifeline. When the cops knocked on the door at 2 in the morning and she had to go pick him up from the station, I remember sitting on the couch in my pajamas, stomach twisted into a knot. She came home with him half an hour later. His face was pale, eyes red. I was ready for the explosion, for something, anything. Instead, she pulled him into a hug so fierce they almost fell over. "My poor boy," she whispered into his hair. "You could have died. Do you want some tea?" He got grounded, technically. No going out for 2 weeks. But she drove him to school every day like a chauffeur and cooked his favorite meals to keep his strength up. When I got a B in chemistry instead of my usual A, she barely looked at the paper. "I can't think about this right now," she snapped. "We have bigger problems with your brother. Why can't you just, for once, not make things harder?" I didn't say anything. I internalized it. Of course I did. I studied harder. I made sure dinner was defrosting when she got home. I helped Jake with his homework when he remembered to ask, even though he'd roll his eyes and say, "Ugh, you sound like a teacher," halfway through. I thought that if I could just be less of a burden, maybe there'd be some love left over. Here's the thing I didn't understand until much later. You cannot work your way into someone's basic empathy. You can contort yourself into 1,000 shapes, and all that happens is you get really good at contorting. I moved out at 19, partly because of college, partly because the house felt like a stage I was done performing on. Mom cried when I told her, but even her tears didn't feel like they were about me. "What am I going to do without you?" she asked, which sounded flattering at first. Then she added, "Who's going to keep your brother in line if you're not here?" I wasn't going far. Just a 20-minute drive away, sharing a crappy apartment with 2 other girls and a silverfish infestation. But something in me wanted to draw a line. "He's an adult," I said. "That's not my job." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Everything I do is for you children," she said. "You're so ungrateful." At college, I got my first glimpse of what normal could look like. My roommate, Priya, would have hour-long phone calls with her mother where they talked about everything from classes to what they were cooking. Sometimes she'd put her on speaker and her mom would ask me, "And how are you, Beta?" Like she actually cared. My other roommate, Lex, had divorced parents who were a mess in their own right. But when she told her dad she was stressed, he mailed her a box of her favorite snacks and a stupid car with a cartoon cat on it. The first time I got sick on my own, I lay in bed shivering, staring at my phone, thumb hovering over Mom's contact. I could picture that conversation, her sighing, asking if I'd been eating properly, reminding me she was already so stressed with your brother. Instead, I texted Priya, who was in the library. 2 hours later, she came back to the apartment with Gatorade, soup, and a thermometer she'd bought at the pharmacy. "My mom says you should alternate Tylenol and ibuprofen," she said, handing me my phone. "She wants to talk to you." Her mom's voice was warm and matter-of-fact. She asked me about my symptoms, told me exactly how much medicine to take, and then scolded me gently for not owning a proper blanket. I hung up feeling weirdly steady, seen in a way I wasn't used to. That was the beginning of what I now call my patchwork family. It wasn't some dramatic adoption or some formal thing. It was just a series of small, consistent kindnesses from people who chose me even when they didn't have to. The professor who pulled me aside after class to ask if I was okay because I seemed distracted, then helped me apply for a scholarship so I could cut down on my work hours. The manager at the coffee shop where I worked who would slip me a free muffin on long shifts and once told a creepy customer, she said no, buddy, so I didn't have to. Priya's mom, mailing me snacks of my own after I sent her a thank you note. Meanwhile, Jake's life was a predictable roller coaster. Community college dropped out, a series of jobs he hated and quit, or got fired from and called it quitting. Girlfriends who started off as the love of my life and ended with drama so loud I could feel the echoes from my tiny apartment. Every time something went wrong for him, Mom would call me. "Your brother is struggling," she'd say, as if this was new information. "He needs support." What about me? I asked once, when I was 23 and working 2 jobs to pay rent and finish my degree. Do I ever need support? She went quiet, then let out a breathy laugh. "You're the strong one," she said. "You know that. You've always been okay." At the time, I took that as a compliment and swallowed my questions like pebbles. Now I hear it for what it is, an excuse. Fast forward to the day of that sentence. I'd graduated, found a decent job, met my current partner, Lena. By then, I'd already started calling Priya's mom Annie without thinking, and Lex's dad would text, "Proud of you, kiddo," when I hit a milestone. I still saw Mom and Jake, but not as often, and always with this simmering tension under the surface. That particular day, I'd gone over to my mom's place because she'd called and said, "We need to talk about your brother," in that tone that made my stomach sink. Lena had offered to come with me, but I told her I'd be okay. "It's just dinner," I said. "How bad could it be?" Famous last words. Jake was already there, at the table, a half-drunk beer next to his elbow. He looked tired in that way he always did when he'd been chasing something, money, women, a new idea, and it hadn't worked out. Mom had made pasta, the kind from a jar, and complained in detail about her coworkers for 20 minutes before finally getting to the point. "Your brother is in trouble," she said, like I hadn't heard that sentence 100 times. "He needs somewhere to stay for a while, just until he gets back on his feet." I felt my shoulders tense. What happened now? She launched into the story. Eviction, job loss, some fight with a girlfriend. I caught maybe half of it. The whole time, I could see where it was heading. "He can stay here," I said, before she could ask. "You've got the spare room." "I can't," she said immediately, pressing a hand to her chest. "You know how he is. He gets wound up. I need my rest. My blood pressure, my anxiety." "So your solution is what?" I cut in. "He moves in with me? Into the 1-bedroom apartment I share with my girlfriend? Where he'll what? Sleep on the couch and smoke in the bathroom." She narrowed her eyes. "Don't be selfish," she said. "You have a stable life. You can handle a little chaos. He can't. You know he doesn't cope well." And there it was, the same story, repackaged. Your needs are negotiable, his are not. Something in me snapped that day. Not like a dramatic explosion, more like a rope finally fraying all the way through. "No," I said quietly. Mom blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated a little louder. "He can't move in with us. I love him, but I can't. I won't do that again. I spent my whole childhood cleaning up his messes. I'm not sacrificing my home for him." Jake shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. "I didn't even ask you," he muttered. "You didn't have to," I said. "She's doing it for you." Mom slammed her fork down. "Why are you making this about you?" she demanded. "I'm trying to keep our family together. By asking one kid to set themselves on fire so the other kid stays warm, I shot back. My hands were shaking under the table. "Have you ever, even once, asked him to take care of me?" She scoffed. "You don't need taking care of. You never have. You're the strong one. Your brother, he's delicate. He's 31, I said. He's not a houseplant." That's when she turned back to the sink, rinsed a plate like this was the most boring conversation she'd ever had, and dropped the line that kicked off this whole post. "I only had enough love for one child," she said, like she was explaining a math problem. "And I chose your brother. You're stronger. You'll be fine." It landed in the space between us and just sat there, buzzing. Here's the thing. My first feeling wasn't anger. It was relief. Like, oh, there it is. The thing I've felt my whole life, finally said in words. Then the anger came, hot and dizzying. "You do realize that's not some kind of noble confession, right?" I said slowly. "You're just admitting you emotionally abandoned one of your kids and are proud of it." She rolled her eyes. "Of course you'd twist it," she muttered. "You always make yourself the victim." Jake opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it again. He looked shaken, which was almost funny in a dark way. This was the dynamic that had benefited him his whole life, and now that it was laid bare, even he couldn't pretend it was normal. "I'm not twisting anything," I said. You just told me, straight up, that you don't have enough love for both your children. What do you want me to do with that? Thank you. She made a dismissive gesture. You're overreacting. That's when I stood up. My chair scraped loudly enough that Jake flinched. No, I said. For once, I'm reacting appropriately. I grabbed my bag from the back of the chair. My hand was still shaking, but my voice felt oddly steady. I'm not going to keep begging you for something you clearly don't have any interest in giving me. Where are you going? Mom demanded, like we were in some sitcom, and she just delivered a punchline I'd failed to appreciate. I said, to the people who actually act like they love me. You're so dramatic, she snapped, running away just because I told you the truth. I looked at Jake. You can find your own couch, I told him. I hope you figure your stuff out, I really do. But it's not going to be by using me as a mattress. He looked like he wanted to apologize, or argue, or both. I didn't ask her to say that, he muttered. I know, I said, and I did. But I also knew he'd benefited from the dynamic for 3 decades without questioning it. You also didn't stop her. Then I left. It wasn't cinematic. Nobody chased me to the door. Mom shouted something about, don't bother coming back if you're going to be like this, which, cool, thanks for the ultimatum. I got in my car, sat there with my hands on the wheel, and started shaking so hard I had to put my forehead on the steering wheel and just breathe. When I finally started the engine, I called Lena on speaker. She picked up halfway through the first ring. Hey babe, how's it? She said she chose him. I blurted. My voice sounded weirdly far away. She actually said it. By the time I got the gist out, I was crying so hard I had to pull over. Ugly crying, the kind where your face scrunches up and your chest feels like it's being squeezed in a vice. Lena just listened, letting me pour it all out, then said, very quietly, okay, you're not going back there tonight. Come home. I'll put the kettle on. When I walked into our apartment 20 minutes later, my eyes puffy and my nose raw, Lena met me at the door and just wrapped her arms around me. No questions, no playing devil's advocate on my mom's behalf. No, but she's your mother. Just, you're safe. You're allowed to be hurt. You're not crazy. The next day, I told Priya and Lex in our group chat what had happened. I half expected some version of, wow, that's harsh, but she didn't mean it. Instead, Priya's first message was, I'm so sorry. That's abuse, babe, not you being oversensitive. Lex followed with, she's a grown adult, not a battery that ran out. She made a choice. That weekend, Priya's mom called me. I heard what that woman said to you, she said, not bothering to sugarcoat that woman as your mom. You know you always have place here, right? You're like my daughter. If you want to call me when you're sad, you call. If you want to come for dinner, you come. I managed to joke, careful, Annie, I'll start showing up unannounced, and she shot back. Then I'll have to keep more food in the house. It's settled. Here's the part one want to make clear. Going no contact or low contact with a parent is not a single decision. It's 100 small ones. After that kitchen table conversation, I didn't send the weekly "How are you?" text out of habit. I muted the family group chat, where Mom mostly posted photos of Jake's latest project. I stopped driving over just to check in. When she called a week later, I let it go to voicemail. She left a message saying I was being childish, punishing her for one little sentence. Then another saying, fine, if you don't want to be part of this family, don't come crying to me when you need something. The thing is, I realized I didn't go to her when I needed something. I went to the people who'd showed up for me consistently. Over the next year, my new family threads wove tighter. Lena's parents invited me to their Thanksgiving for the first time. I was nervous, expecting to feel like an outsider, but her mom greeted me at the door with a hug and an apron. You're on mashed potato duty, she said. Lena says you make them better than I do. Lena's dad pulled me aside later and said, we're glad you're here. Any friend of our daughter's that makes her this happy is family. I cried in their downstairs bathroom like an idiot because no one in my bio family had ever said anything like that to me. My boss at work, who is in her 50s and has 2 grown kids, started referring to me as my work daughter in this half-joking, half-serious way. When I got sick again that winter, she sent me home early with a blanket from her office and emailed me soup recipes. When I got my first promotion, she hugged me and said, you did this, not because you're strong and ignore your needs, but because you work hard and you're smart. I hope you know that. I'm not saying everything magically healed. There are still days I see a mom and daughter shopping together, laughing over something stupid, and my chest aches in this dull, familiar way. I still have this reflex when something good happens to think I should tell Mom, before remembering that telling her would just turn into a conversation about Jake or a lecture about how I think I'm better than everyone now. Jake reached out a couple of times in the months after the sentence. Wants to ask if I talked to Mom because she wouldn't stop crying about how cruel I was being. I told him gently that he could be the one to comfort her now. Wants to ask if we could get coffee, just the two of us. I almost said yes, but then he sent a follow-up message. I hate seeing her like this. You know how fragile she is. Can't you just apologize so we can go back to normal? Normal. I stared at that word for a long time. Normal had been me carrying the emotional weight of 3 people while being told I didn't need love because I was strong. Normal meant my pain was an inconvenience and his pain was a national emergency. So I wrote back, I'm not the one who needs to apologize. Then I put the phone down and cried, not because I regretted it, but because it's hard to let go of the fantasy that one day, if you just explain it right, they'll finally get it. A few months ago, Lena and I got engaged. We had a small party at our place. Friends, my patchwork parents, some coworkers. Priya's mom brought enough food for 50 people, even though there were 15 of us. Lena's dad tried to give a speech and cried halfway through, and everyone teased him while also wiping their eyes. At one point, I was standing in the kitchen, watching people I love pile food onto their plates, hearing overlapping conversations and laughter, and I had this sharp, clear thought. Oh, this is family. Not the people who share your DNA and think that give them a permanent pass to treat you however they want, but the ones who show up. The ones who ask how you are and actually listen. The ones who see you screw up and still choose you. I don't know what will happen with my mom and brother in the long term. Maybe she'll double down on her choice and paint me as the ungrateful runaway. Maybe one day she'll sit with the discomfort of what she said and realize she carved one kid open so she could wrap the other in bubble wrap. Maybe Jake will grow a spine and question why the person who supposedly only had enough love for one child gave it all to him and still left him floundering. What I do know is this. I stopped waiting to be picked. I stopped auditioning for the role of worthy child in a play that was rigged from the start. I decided that if my own mother didn't have room for me in her heart, I would build a life full of people who did. Mom says she only had enough love for one child. I don't think that's true. I think she had enough fear, enough control, enough unresolved crap for one narrative, and she shoved us into it whether it fit or not. But love? I see it every day now. In Lena making my coffee the way I like it without asking. In Priya's mom texting me, "Did you eat?" From a different continent. In my boss standing up for me in meetings. In friends showing up to help us move and staying to assemble IKEA furniture badly. If you're reading this and feeling that awful, hollow, why wasn't I chosen, feeling in your own chest, I guess this is the part where I tell you what I wish someone had told me at 19. Being the unchosen one in your family of origin doesn't mean you're unchoosable. It just means those particular people didn't know how to see you. There are others who will, and you're allowed to choose them back.